Chapter 28 of A Voyage in the Sunbeam, Our Home on the Ocean for 11 Months. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Voyage in the Sunbeam, Our Home on the Ocean for 11 Months by Anna Brassey. Chapter 28 Home. She comes, majestic with her swelling sails, the gallant bark along her watery way. Homeward she drives before the favouring gales. Now flitting at their length the streamers fly, and now they ripple with the ruffling breeze. Wednesday, May the 2nd. Steam was up at 5 o'clock, the wind being still fair but light. Soon it dropped to a calm, and then went round and blew with great force exactly in the opposite direction dead ahead. The fires had to be put out, for it was so rough we could do no good steaming against the gale. The screw kept racing round and shaking the vessel terribly. Of course I was very ill, but the maids did not mind, and the children rather enjoyed the tumbling about and the water on the deck. We continued scudding along through the water, but not making much progress on our course. Thursday, May the 3rd. The wind kept on increasing, and at last blew quite a gale. We have gone a long way out of our course to the northward, ready for a favourable change, but we can scarcely make any way to the westward. Friday, May the 4th. A repetition of yesterday. Beating all the day, but never a bit ahead. Saturday, May the 5th. A lull at last, and we are able to have the fires lighted and to steam on our course. We made the island of Scarpanto in the morning. All the afternoon and evening we have been steaming along 10 miles to the southward of Crete. Its outline was very beautiful, surmounted by the snow-capped mountains. I was up on deck just in time to behold the most lovely sunset, with exquisite rosy, purple and crimson tints on sea and sky. I have not quite got over my attack in Cairo yet, and for the last 3 days have been completely laid up with a various mixture of land illness and seasickness. We stopped steaming late in the day, but fires were lighted again in the middle of the night, as the wind was still ahead. There was a discussion whether or not to go round the north side of the island of Candia, so as to have a glimpse of the British fleet at anchor in Suda Bay, if they have already arrived there. Sunday, May the 6th and Monday, May the 7th. Early in the morning, the snowy mountains of Crete were still in sight. Service was held as usual at 11, but it was too rough in the afternoon for it to be repeated. Sail and steam, wind and calm, alternated with one another all day. Tom is anxious to sail every mile he can, and yet not to lose any unnecessary time, and finds it exceedingly difficult to combine those two objects. Tuesday, May the 8th. A fine morning, with a cold strong head breeze. At noon we rejoiced to think that Malta was not more than a few miles ahead, or we should assuredly have failed to reach our port before nightfall. About 3 we closed in with the land about Marsa Scirocco and Delamara Point, and after 1 or 2 tacks rounded the point of Ricasole, and leaving Port St. Elmo on our right, we swiftly glided into the grand harbour of Valletta. We have been here so often that it feels quite like reaching home. We soon found ourselves in our old quarters in the Dockyard Creek, and had scarcely moored before one of the officers came on board with the usual complimentary offers of assistance, whilst directly afterwards came an invitation to a farewell ball at the palace, given to the Duke of Edinburgh. Our old boatman, Bubbly Joe, took us ashore to dinner, and we found everything looking as bright and cheerful and steep as it always does and always will do, not the least bit altered or modernized. The landlord of the Hotel d'Angleterre was delighted to see us again, and so were his servants, who came flocking from all parts of the house, nearly pulling the children to pieces, and plying our own servants with questions in their anxiety to know all about us. We had to go back on board the yacht to dress, and then return for the ball, by which time I was so thoroughly tired and had so bad a headache that I could not enjoy it much, pleasant as it was. Very soon after supper we came away and had a charming row across the harbour to our snug quarters on board the Sunbeam. These sudden bursts of dissipation on shore are a delightful change after days and weeks at sea. Wednesday, May the 9th. I was up soon after sunrise and admired this often abused creek as much as I always do. The stone houses, the carved and coloured verandas of bright flowers, the water lapping the very doorsteps, the gaily painted boats with their high prows at either end, the women in their black dresses and faldettas, and black-robed priests, all helped to carry the imagination over the Mediterranean and up the Adriatic to lovely Venice. At this hour in the morning there were not many English soldiers or sailors to spoil the illusion. Malta is essentially a borderland, African by geographical configuration, European politically, and assuredly Asiatic in its language, its buildings, and in the manners and customs of the natives. We gave everybody on board a holiday and the chance of a run ashore today to stretch their legs after their long sea voyage. Tom went on board the Sultan to see the Duke of Edinburgh and his splendid ship. Whilst at breakfast I received an intimation that the Duke of Edinburgh wished to come and examine the yacht. His Royal Highness arrived soon afterwards, quite unattended, in a beautiful 10-oared barge, and paid us a long visit, inspecting the yacht minutely and looking at all the pets. He took a great interest in our voyage and courses, as well as in the numerous curiosities, knowing at once from what place each had been procured. The Duke, who had taken very nearly the same cruise himself in the Galatea a few years ago, inquired very kindly after all his old friends at Tahiti, Hilo, Honolulu, and many other places. The Duke is very kind to everybody here. He is much liked by his brother officers and the squadron, and both His Royal Highness and the Duchess seem to have made themselves most popular here during the winter. The officers of the Sultan, several of whom are old friends of ours, appear to think themselves fortunate indeed in having such a commanding officer, whilst on shore his approaching departure is universally regretted. Everybody seems full of their Royal Highness's winter ball, which must have been a most brilliant affair. After the Duke's departure we went ashore again, called on various friends before luncheon, and went over the palace and through the armory. Then we took a walk down the Strada Real, the shopping street of Valletta, until it was time to go on board to receive some friends to tea. The shops are full of coral, lace, gold and silver filigree work, and the new sort of lace they make in Gozo, of white silk in beautiful patterns. It has been manufactured only during the last few years, and varies much in quality and design. Some 40 or 50 friends came on board and amused themselves looking at our curiosities and photographs until long past the dinner hour. We had to hurry on shore to dine and go afterwards to the Opera Manuel. The new Grand Opera House is not to be opened until next October. It had been blowing fresh and strong from the westward all day, but tonight, as we rowed across the harbour, the breeze had dropped to a flat calm, and Tom is most anxious to be off at daybreak. Thursday, May the 10th. I was up before sunrise. A fresh, fair wind was blowing, and as soon as the children could be got ready, we all went ashore to the market, which was crowded with people, and full of fish, meat, and all spring vegetables and fruit. We were to start at 6:30, though there was no time to lose, and laden with lovely bouquets of flowers, we hastened on board. But it was 9 o'clock, after all our haste, before we were fairly off, through some mistake about the bill of health. Malta is certainly the most delightful place for yachting winter quarters, with its fine, healthy harbour, charming society, very cheap living, and abundance of everything good. It is in proximity to many pleasant places, and most interesting excursions can easily be made to Sicily and Italy, or the coast of Africa. Today we glided along the coast, past the strongly fortified little island of Consino, standing boldly out in mid-channel between Malta and Gozo. The Mediterranean appears to us a highway after the lonely oceans and seas we have been sailing over. Within 1 hour this morning we saw more ships than in the whole of our passage from Valparaiso to Tahiti and Yokohama. Towards the evening we could see the island of Pantellaria in the distance. We retain a lively remembrance of it from having been becalmed just off it in the Albatross for 3 weary days and nights. It was after this and a long series of other vexations and delays that Tom and I registered a vow never to go on long voyage again in a yacht without at least auxiliary steam power. Friday, May the 11th. At 2:30 a.m. Pantellaria was abeam. At 5, the homeward-bound P&O steamer passed us quite close, and at 6 we met the outward-bound P&O steamer. At 8 we passed Cape Bon and sailed across the mouth of the Bay of Tunis, in the centre of which is Goletta, the port of Tunis, the site of the ancient city of Carthage. Once we anchored close by that place for 2 or 3 days, and on that occasion I collected enough varieties of marble and mosaic from the old palaces to make some beautiful tables when we got home. In the afternoon and evening we made the Fratelli and the Sorel rocks, and still later the little island of Galita. There were many steamers going in all directions, and it struck one very forcibly how much this little islet in mid-channel stands in need of a light. Sunday, May the 13th. The wind was dead ahead, and the sea of that remarkably confused character for which the Mediterranean is famous. It seemed as if the wind of yesterday, the wind of tomorrow, and the wind of today all had met and were bent on making a night of it. We had service at 11 and 4. The chart, now a good old friend, for it has been used by us on so many Mediterranean voyages, showed that this is the 4th noontide we have spent within a radius of 30 miles of this particular spot. Within a radius of 60 miles we have spent at least 3 weeks of our lives at various periods. This does not, of course, include voyages in steamers which are not recorded in the chart. Monday, May the 14th. About breakfast time today we crossed the meridian of Greenwich, and this virtually completed our voyage round the world, our original point of departure having really been Rochester, which is a few minutes to the east of Greenwich. The wind changed in the middle of the day, and we passed through a large fleet of merchantmen hove to under shelter of Cape de Gat, where they had collected, I suppose, from various ports in Spain and Italy. Tuesday, May the 15th. This was a somewhat sad day, many of our pets dying from the effects of the cold wind or from accidents. The steward's mockingbird from Siam, which talked like a Christian and followed him about like dog, died of acute bronchitis early this morning, and his monkey, the most weird little creature, with the affectionate ways of a human friend, died in the afternoon of inflammation and congestion of the lungs. 2 other monkeys and several birds also expired in the course of the day. This evening, Beau Brummel, the little pig I brought from Bow Island in the South Pacific, died of a broken spine, as the doctor, who made a post-mortem examination in each case, discovered. A spar must have dropped upon poor piggy accidentally, whilst he was running about on deck, though of course no one knew anything about it. I am very sorry, for though I must confess he was somewhat greedy and pig-like in his habits, he was extremely amusing in his ways. He ran about and went to sleep with the pugs, just like one of themselves. Besides, I do not think anyone else in England could have boasted of a pig given to them by a South Sea Island chief. Probably Beau Brummel was a lineal descendant of the pigs Captain Cook took out in the Endeavour. The bodies were all placed together in a neat little box and committed to the deep at sunset, a few tears being shed over the departed pets, especially by the children. Tuesday, May the 15th. Cape de Gat was abeam early this morning. The wind fell light, but Tom hoped it would freshen again. Otherwise, with steam, we might easily have got into Gibraltar tonight. As it was, fires were not lighted until 10 o'clock. Wednesday, May the 16th. At 3 a.m. I was called to see the light on Europa Point and stayed on deck to watch the day dawn and the rising of the sun. It was not, however, a very agreeable morning. The Levanter was blowing, the signal station was enveloped in mist, the tops of the mountains of Africa were scarcely discernible above the clouds, and Ceuta and Apes Hill were invisible. Algeciras and St. Roque gleamed white on the opposite shore of the bay, while the dear old rock itself looked fresher and cleaner than usual, exhaling a most delicious perfume of flowers. As the sun rose, the twitterings of the birds in the Alameda sounded most homelike and delightful. We had dropped our anchor inside the New Mole about 4:30, and before 6 the familiar sounds of English martial music could be heard from all the different barracks, as the regiments came marching down the hill and along the Alameda to the north front, with all their baggage, military trains, tents, and ambulances, for a day's camping out. We were anxious to get on shore, to see about coals, water, and provisions, but no health boat came near us. About 7 o'clock we started in despair, first to hail a policeman on shore, at a most respectful distance, to inquire where we could get pratique. Then we procured it, and sent word back to the Sunbeam that she was out of quarantine, and might hoist the yellow flag. We landed, went to the market, bought some lovely carnations stuck in a prickly pear left to keep them fresh, and then went to the Hotel Royal, kept by the landlord of the old Clubhouse Hotel, where we had so often stayed, to order breakfast. Our old friends, the servants, greeted us at the very step from the house door to the coffee room, and we were taken special care of by a waiter who remembered us. After breakfast we went to pay some visits. We thought we ought to go and look at the galleries and signal station, as one or two of our party had never been here before. So we started, some on foot and some on donkeys. All the way up the steep streets of the Moorish castle, girls met us, selling lovely scarlet carnations and yellow roses. The galleries have not changed in the least since our last visit, but our soldier guide told us they were daily expecting some big guns to come out, and he gave us a minute explanation how they were to be mounted. It was a pleasant ride, neither too hot nor too cold. Every crevice and interstice between the rocks was full of wild flowers, looking bright and pretty, though somewhat insignificant after the gorgeous tropical blossoms our eyes have been lately accustomed to. The fog had cleared off, and the view was beautiful. Ships lay in the bay below us from all parts, including a Portuguese gunboat. We saw also one of the two old eagles sitting near her nest in the accustomed place. This year she has only one young one. We did not see the monkeys on account of the Levanter, but their number has increased to 24, so that there is no immediate fear of their becoming extinct. At 6:30 p.m. we weighed anchor and steamed out of the anchorage inside the New Mole. In the straits the wind was fair, so the funnel was soon lowered, and the screw feathered, and we were racing along under sail alone. Off Tarifa we found quite a gale blowing, and the wind continued fresh and fair throughout the night. Thursday, May the 17th. The strong fair wind dropped, and then came dead ahead, and off Cadiz we had to get up steam. There was a strong wind off the mountains near Cape Sagres, and while Tom was below and the men were busy reefing the sails, we nearly ran ashore. Luckily, I noticed our danger and called Tom, who came up just in time to alter the helm, when the yacht went round like a top, though the shore was too close to be pleasant. It only shows how easily an accident may occur. Both our fishermen mates could not bear to be idle, and always considered looking out an insignificant occupation, and so neglected that important duty to assist with the sails. Off Cape St. Vincent it blew so hard that we were afraid we should be obliged to bring up in the Bay of Sagres, but we found that it was only a land breeze, and that it was much smoother outside than we had expected. Friday, May the 18th. Fresh breeze. We met many steamers going down the coast with all sails set. After passing Cape Espichel, the wind increased to a northerly gale, against which it was impossible to proceed. We therefore put into Lisbon. The mountains at the mouth of the Tagus, the tower and church of Belem, and the noble river itself looked even more beautiful in the sunset than my recollection led me to expect. We soon landed and had an excellent dinner at the Hotel Braganza, where we had stayed before, and where we were at once recognized and cordially received by the same landlord and landlady we remembered in 1861. After dinner we went for a walk. One of the things we saw during our stroll was the fine statue of Louis de Camoens, especially interesting to us, as we had so recently seen the place where he passed many of the weary years of his exile. Rolling Motion Square was as giddy as ever. It was a curious fancy to pave it in such a way as to make it look like the waves of the sea perpetually moving, and it must be a severe trial to the peripatetic powers of those who have not quite recovered their sea legs. Saturday, May the 19th. We were off early. It was a lovely day, and we had a pleasant drive to Sintra. On our arrival we mounted donkeys and went to Peña, the beautiful palace of the ex-King Ferdinand, situated at the top of the mountains. It is an extraordinarily looking place, the different parts being built in every imaginable style of architecture, with exquisite carving and old tiles that would delight the heart of a connoisseur. One of the most prominent objects near the Palace of Peña is the statue of Vasco da Gama, nobly placed on a pedestal of natural rocks, piled on the summit of mountain peak, and worthy of the adventurous traveller it is erected to commemorate. The gardens are full of camellias, roses, bougainvillea, etc. We lunched at the excellent hotel and came to the conclusion that Sintra is the place not only to spend a happy day, but many happy months. It is always pleasant to revisit places of which you have agreeable reminiscences, and to find your expectations surpassed instead of disappointed. We had a hot drive back to Lisbon, and then went by tram to Belem, where we spent some time in the church and in wandering through its exquisite cloisters. The first stone was laid in 1500, and the name changed from Bairro de Restello to Belem or Bethlehem by Prince Henry of Portugal, the great promoter of maritime discovery in that century. It was built specially to commemorate the successful voyage of Vasco da Gama, who returned from the discovery of India in 1499. Tom met us with the yacht, and we went on board with the intention of proceeding straight to sea. But after passing through the Canal du Nord, a heavy gale obliged us to anchor in Cascais Bay for the night, not far from a small schooner yacht with 3 ladies on board. It was rather rough, and we were very tired, or I think we should have ventured to pay them a visit, even at the late hour. It is absurd to stand upon ceremony when travelling, but I scarcely know what the strict etiquette would be on such an occasion, whether they, as first anchored in the bay, should call on us, or we on them, as probably the greater travellers and out longer at sea. Sunday, May the 20th. Weighed at 5 a.m. There was a dense fog off Cape del Roca, and the steam whistle, fog horns, and bell were constantly kept going, with lugubrious effect. We had service at 11 and 4:30. Passed the Burlings at 1:30. Heavy swell all day. Monday, May the 21st. Rough and disagreeable. Off Viana at noon. Passed Oporto and Vigo in the course of the afternoon. Tuesday, May the 22nd. If yesterday was bad, today was worse. We hove to for some time under the shelter of Cape Finisterre, then went on again for a short distance, but at 1:30 a.m. on the 23rd we were obliged to put round and wait for daylight. Wednesday, 23rd, and Thursday, 24th. In the course of the day the weather mended, though the sea still continued rough, and our course was really in the direction of America rather than England. In the evening of the 24th we were able to light fires, and with the assistance of steam to keep nearly on our proper course. Saturday, May the 26th. Saw the first English land, the Start, at 2:30 a.m. Wind continued fresh and fair, but at noon dropped calm, and we had to steam through the Needles instead of sailing, as we had done on our way out. We reached Cowes about 3 p.m. and were immediately welcomed by several yachts, who dipped their ensigns and fired their guns. We landed and were warmly greeted by many friends, and after sending off telegrams and letters, re-embarked and proceeded towards Hastings. We were anxious to land by daylight, but this was not to be, so it turned out to be midnight before we reached Beachy Head and could discern the lights of Hastings shining in the distance. As we drew near to our anchorage, we could see 2 boats coming swiftly towards us from the shore. The crews were members of the Royal Naval Artillery Volunteers, and as they came alongside, they raised a shout of welcome. Hastings had been expecting us all the afternoon, and late as was the hour, 1:30 a.m., we were immediately surrounded by a fleet of boats, and many willing hands seized our heterogeneous cargo and multitudinous packages, and before daylight all had been safely landed on the pier. We committed ourselves to the care of R.N.A.V. and landed in their boats, and at 4:30, proceeding to the Queen's Hotel, we had a joyous meeting with T.A.B. and Maud. How can I describe the warm greetings that met us everywhere, or the crowd that surrounded us, not only when we landed, but as we came out of church? How, along the whole 10 miles from Hastings to Battle, people were standing by the roadside and at their cottage doors to welcome us. How the Battle bell-ringers never stopped ringing except during service time, or how the warmest of welcomes ended our delightful year of travel and made us feel we were home at last, with thankful hearts for the providential care which had watched over us whithersoever we roamed. I travelled among unknown men, in lands beyond the sea, nor England did I know till then what love I bore to thee. End of chapter 28. The Appendix of A Voyage in the Sunbeam, Our Home on the Ocean for 11 Months. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Voyage in the Sunbeam, Our Home on the Ocean for 11 Months by Anna Brassey, Appendix. When we finally sailed from Cowes on July 6, 1876, the list of persons on board the yacht was as follows: Thomas Brassey, Esquire, M.P., owner; Mrs. Brassey; Thomas Allnutt Brassey; Mabel Annie Brassey; Muriel Agnes Brassey; Mary Adelaide Brassey; Honorable A.Y. Bingham; F. Hubert Freer, Esquire; Commander James Brown, R.N.; Captain Squire T.S. Lecky, R.N.R.; Henry Percy Potter, Esquire, Surgeon; Isaiah Powell, Sailing Master; Henry Kindred, Boatswain; John Ridge Templeman, Carpenter; Charles Cook, Signalman and Gunner; James Allen, Coxswain of the gig; James Walford, Captain of the hold; John Fail, Coxswain of the cutter; Henry Parker, second coxswain of the gig. William Seborn, A.B., Walter Seborn, Turner Ennue, William Moulton, A.B., Albert Wiseman, John Green, Thomas Taylor, Frederick Butt, Henry Tichener, Thomas Powell Forecastle Cook, William Cole, boy, Robert Rowbottom, engineer, Charles McKechnie, second engineer, Thomas Kirkham, leading fireman, George Burrage, fireman, George Leslie, steward, William Ainsworth, bedroom steward, Frederick Parsons, saloon steward, George Bassett, second saloon steward, William Pride, cook, Joseph Southgate, cook's mate, Emma Adams, nurse, Harriet Hoe, lady's maid, Mary Phillips, stewardess. The list of those who were temporarily on board the yacht during the voyage comprised the following persons. Arrivals. Crew of Monkshaven came on board the Sunbeam September 28. Arthur Turner, one of the crew, remained on board the Sunbeam as an able-bodied seaman. John Seborn from U.S. Ashuelot, Hong Kong. John Shaw, undercook, Hong Kong. Isaac Ayak, Hong Kong. John Ahan, Hong Kong. Mahomet, fireman, Gaul. Abraham, fireman, Gaul. Tom Dollar, fireman, Gaul. Mr. and Mrs. Woodruff, Ismaila. Total 24. Departures. T. Alnut Brassey, Rio. Crew of Monkshaven, 14, placed on board the Ultimate October the 5th. Captain Lecky, Buenos Aires. Geo Leslie, Ensenada. Captain Brown, Honolulu. William Pride, Honolulu. John Fail, Malacca. Mahomet, fireman, Suez. Abraham, fireman, Suez. Tom Dollar, fireman, Eden. Mr. and Mrs. Woodruff, Port Said. Total 25. Note: many were the preparations to be made before starting on our voyage. The crew had to be selected. We had to decide whether all, any, or none of the children should be taken, what friends we should invite to accompany us, what stores and provisions we should take, and to select from our little fleet of boats those which seemed best suited for the various requirements of the voyage. The whole number comprised the Gleam, lifeboat cutter, the Glance, large gig, the Ray, light gig, the Trap, to catch a sunbeam, steam launch, the Moat, dingy, the Flash, light outrigger. Of these, the Trap and the Ray had to be left behind. A letter from the Times of June the 2nd, 1877. To the Editor of the Times, Sir, believing it possible that some interest may attach to the voyage completed on May the 27th by the arrival of the Sunbeam at Cowes, adventure to offer to your readers a short narrative of our proceedings. The expedition is in some respects unprecedented. A circumnavigation of 35,400 miles has never before been made in the short period of 46 weeks, from which must be deducted 112 days of well-earned repose in harbour. We had, it is true, the advantage of steam, without which such a performance would have been an impossibility, but we travelled 20,517 miles under sail alone, and the consumption of coal has not exceeded 350 tons. The Sunbeam sailed from Cowes on July the 6th, called at Torbay, Madeira, Teneriffe, and the Cape Verde, crossed the line on August the 8th, and carrying a favourable breeze in the southeast trades, without even a momentary lull, a distance of 2,500 miles, arrived at Rio Janeiro on August the 17th. Following the coasts of South America, we visited Montevideo, Buenos Aires, and Ensenada, steamed through the Straits of Magellan and Smith's Channel, and reached Valparaiso on October the 21st. While on the coast of Patagonia, it was our privilege to rescue a crew of 15 hands from the barque Monkshaven, laden with an inflammable cargo of smelting coals, which had been on fire 6 days when we most providentially described her signals of distress. On October the 30th, we commenced our long and lonely voyage of 12,330 miles across the Pacific. We touched at Bow Island in the Low Archipelago, Maitea and Tahiti in the Society Islands, and Hawaii and Oahu in the Sandwich Group. On January the 21st, we sighted Assumption in the Ladrones, and on the 29th arrived at Yokohama. While in Japan, we were present at the opening of the railway from Osaka to Kyoto by the Mikado, and subsequently cruised in the Inland Sea in severe winterly weather. At Shimonoseki we found the people much agitated by the recent outbreak of the Satsuma clan. On February the 19th, we bade a reluctant farewell to Japan, and following the most direct route to England, visited in succession Hong Kong, Canton, Macao, Singapore, Johor, Malacca, Penang, Galle, Colombo, Aden, Alexandria, Malta, Gibraltar, and Lisbon. Having given the principal dates, the story of its voyage will be most rapidly completed by entering our successive passages in a tabular statement. Thames and English Channel. Miles. Steam 193. Sail 205. Total 398. Torbay to Madeira. Miles. Steam 353. Sail 874. Total 1227. Madeira to Orotava, Tenerife. Miles. Steam 164. Sail 72. Total 236. Orotava to Tarrafal Bay, San Antonio, Cape Verde. Miles. Steam 35. Sail 886. Total 921. Tarrafal Bay to Rio Janeiro. Miles. Steam 689. Sail 2647. Total 3336. Rio to Montevideo and Buenos Aires. Miles. Steam 509. Sail 712. Total 1221. Buenos Aires to Possession Bay, Straits of Magellan. Miles. Steam 816. Sail 524. Total 1340. In Straits of Magellan and Smith Channel. Miles. Steam 565. Sail none. Total 565. To Lota and Valparaiso. Miles. Steam 634. Sail 500. Total 1134. Valparaiso to Yokohama, calling at Hao into Pomotu Group, Maitea and Tahiti in the Society Islands, and Hawaii on Oahu in the Sandwich Group. Miles. Steam 2108. Sail 10,225. Total 12,333. Yokohama to Kobe and Shimonoseki through the Inland Sea. Miles. Steam 653. Sail none. Total 653. Shimonoseki to Hong Kong. Miles. Steam 395. Sail 1015. Total 1410. Hong Kong to Singapore. Miles. Steam 312. Sail 1251. Total 1563. Singapore to Point de Galle, cowling at the Straits Settlements. Miles. Steam 1668. Sail none. Total 1668. Galle to Colombo on Aden. Miles. Steam 2202. Sail none. Total 2202. Aden to Suez. Miles. Steam 807. Sail 551. Total 1358. Suez to Alexandria. Miles. Steam 436. Sail none. Total 436. Alexandria to Cowes, touching at Malta, Gibraltar, and Lisbon. Miles. Steam 2440. Sail 934. Total 3374. All in total, miles by steam 14,979, miles by sail 20,396, miles total 35,375. Having sketched the voyage in outline, The following details may not be devoid of interest to readers with nautical tastes. Every yachtsman should be a lover of sailing. In the cruise of the Sunbeam, although expedition was an essential consideration, steam has been used almost exclusively in calms or in narrow waters, or when, as it has often happened, we have sailed at sunset after a hard day's work on board, intending to make an offing during the night and set sails in the morning. Of the total distance of 15,000 knots under steam, 12,000 were traversed under those special circumstances which seem to justify even a yachtsman in availing himself of the unromantic but invaluable engine. The best run under steam alone was 230 knots, and the most successful continuous performance was on the passage from Penang to Galle, in the week ending April 15th, when the Sunbeam steamed 1,451 knots, with a daily consumption of 4 1/4 of tons of coal. The best runs under sail from noon to noon were 298 and 299 knots respectively. The first was on the passage from Honolulu to Yokohama, sailing along the 16th parallel of north latitude, and between 163rd degree and 168th degree and 15 minutes east. The second was in the Formosa Channel. The highest speed ever attained under sail was 15 knots in a squall in the North Pacific. On 28 days the distance under sail alone has exceeded, and often considerably exceeded, 200 knots. The best consecutive runs under sail only were 1. Week ending August 13th, South Atlantic, in the southeast trades, wind abeam, force 5, 1,456 knots. 2. Week ending November 19, South Pacific, southeast trades, wind aft, force 5, 1,360 knots. 3. 4 days, January 15 to 18th, North Pacific, northeast trades, wind on the quarter, force 5 to 9, 1,027 knots. The average speed in this case was 107 knots an hour. The following were the average speeds of the longer passages. Cape Verde to Rio, days at sea 18, total distance miles 3,336, distance under steam miles 689, daily average miles 185. Valparaiso to Yokohama, days at sea 72, total distance 12,333 miles, distance under steam 2,108 miles, daily average 171 miles. Shimonoseki and Aden, days at sea 37, total distance 6,391 miles, distance under steam 4,577 miles, daily average 187 miles. The vessel which has carried us so rapidly and safely round the globe claims a brief description. She was designed by Mr. Sinclair Barne, of Liverpool, and may be technically defined as a composite 3-mast topsail-yard screw schooner. The engines by Messrs. Laird are of 7 nominal or 350 indicated horsepower, and developed a speed of 10.13 knots on the measured mile. The bunkers contain 80 tons of coal. The average daily consumption is 4 tons, and the speed 8 knots in fine weather. The principal dimensions of the hull are: length for tonnage 157 feet, beam extreme 27 feet 6 inches, displacement tonnage 531 tons, area of midship section 202 square feet. With an addition of 20 feet to the length and more engine power, the Sunbeam presents a type which might be found efficient for naval services in distant waters, where good sailing qualities are essential and large ships are not required. On looking back and contrasting the anticipated difficulties with the actual experiences of the voyage, the ease and certainty with which every passage has been made are truly surprising. Our track has been for the most part within the tropics. The storms off the Cape of Good Hope and Cape Horn have been avoided in the inland passages of the Straits of Magellan and the Suez Canal. We have encountered no continuous stormy weather except during the 4 days preceding our arrival at Yokohama. We have suffered discomfort from heat and detention in calms, but storms have disturbed us seldom, and they have not lasted long. Our experience of gales include a northeast gale off Cape Finisterre on the outward voyage, a northerly gale between Rio and the River Plate, a westerly gale off the east coast of Patagonia, short but severe gales on each of the 4 days preceding our arrival at Yokohama, a severe gale from the northwest in the Inland Sea, a northeast gale in the Formosa Channel, a northerly gale in the Straits of Jubal, a westerly gale off Port Said, and an easterly gale on the south coast of Candia. On the passage homewards from Gibraltar, we met strong northerly winds on the coast of Portugal, and a northeast gale off Cape Finisterre. The navigation has presented few difficulties. All the coasts we have visited have been surveyed. Lighthouses are now as numerous and efficient on the coasts of China and Japan as on the shores of Europe. Such is the perfection of the modern chronometer that lunar observations, the only difficult work in ocean navigation, are no longer necessary, and the wind charts published by the Admiralty supply to the amateur navigator accumulated information and valuable hints for every stage of his voyage. How infinitely easy is the task of the modern circumnavigator compared with the hazardous explorations of Magellan's and Captain Cook, when the chronometer was an instrument of rude and untrustworthy quality, when there were no charts, and the roaring of the breakers in the dead of night was the mariner's first warning that a coral reef was near. Our comprehensive and varied cruise has strengthened my former convictions that the disasters due to negligence bear a large proportion to the number of inevitable losses. Every coast is dangerous to the careless commander, but there are no frequented seas where, with the exercise of caution and reasonable skill, the dangers cannot be avoided. These remarks do not, of course, apply to cases of disaster from stress of weather. In fogs there must be delay, though not necessarily danger. In these days of lamentation over the degeneracy of the British seamen, my experience may be accepted as a contribution to the mass of evidence on this vexed question. I have not been surrounded by such smart seamen as can only be found on a man of war, but I have no ground for general or serious complaint. Many of my crew have done their duty most faithfully. In emergencies everybody has risen to the occasion, and has done best when his skill or endurance was most severely tried. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and sought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine. It is always in stormy weather that the good qualities of the British seaman are displayed to the greatest advantage. The difficulty is to keep up his interest and energies in long intervals of fine weather, when nothing occurs to rouse him to an effort, and the faculties of the seaman before the mast, no less than those of his officer, are benumbed by the monotony and isolation from mankind, which are the gravest drawbacks of a sailor's life. It is in these dull moments that men are tempted to drink and quarrel, that officers become tyrannical, and their crews insubordinate, or even mutinous. Lest it should be thought that my impressions of the average sailor are derived from an exceptional crew or picked men, I have only to add that the manning of the Sunbeam was a family job. The sailing master was related by blood or marriage to the majority of his subordinates, fishermen from the coast of Essex, who had received their early training among the banks and shoals at the mouth of the Thames. In this connection I tender my sincere tribute of praise to the officers of the Navy for their success in maintaining the efficiency and spirit of their crews through long commissions on foreign stations, much time being necessarily spent in harbour, in many cases in the most enervating climates. The discipline of the service seems to be admirable, and the seamen are reconciled to it by tradition, by early training, and perhaps by an instinctive perception of its necessity. I am equally bound to commend the efficiency of our consular service in the remotest outposts of civilization, which we have visited, and evidences of good colonial administration are abundantly manifest in Hong Kong, Singapore, Penang, Ceylon, and Aden, in the prosperity and contentment of the people. It is scarcely necessary to observe, in conclusion, that experiences may be gathered in a voyage of circumnavigation which are not to be gleaned from blue books or from shorter cruises in European waters. A more vivid impression is formed of the sailor's daily life, of his privations at sea, and his temptations on shore. The services required of the Navy are more clearly appreciated after a visit to distant foreign stations. Such a voyage indeed is a serious effort. It demands many laborious days and anxious nights of watching. For my safe return to those pale, those white-faced shores, so welcome to the homeward bound, accompanied, happily, by the adventurous little family who have taken part in the expedition, I am truly thankful. I am, Sir, your obedient servant, Thomas Brassey, Cowes. End of the Appendix. And this is also the end of A Voyage in the Sunbeam, Our Home on the Ocean for 11 Months by Anna Brassey.